In a surprising and deeply touching moment, Hollywood icon Denzel Washington was seen shedding tears during a live television appearance after receiving an unexpected call from Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré. The words shared during that call left the audience and viewers across the globe in stunned silence. This remarkable interaction demonstrated that real leadership and deep respect can cross boundaries of nations, cultures, and even celebrity. What started as a typical late-night talk show shifted dramatically. Cheers filled the room as Denzel Washington walked on stage smiling, composed, legendary. The host welcomed him with enthusiasm, tossing jokes and showing clips from Denzel's recent work, yet behind his warm laugh, something in his gaze seemed distant, like part of him was elsewhere. Midway through the show, the host grinned and said, "We've got a little surprise for you tonight." Denzel, a live call from someone far away. Denzel raised an eyebrow. What kind of surprise? The screen behind him suddenly lit up, displaying the flag of Burkina Faso. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. Then a voice came through, strong, courteous, and gentle. "Good evening, Mr. Washington. This is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso." Denzel froze. The entire studio fell silent. For the first time ever on that show, there was total stillness, only the sound of one man's breath catching in his throat. No one, absolutely no one, could have predicted what followed. The audience watched as Denzel's hands began to tremble. President Traoré continued, his French accented English sincere and steady. "You don't know me, Mr. Washington, but when I was 14 years old, I was just a barefoot boy in Burkina Faso. I saw you in glory. I saw a black man not begging, not afraid, but strong and demanding justice." Denzel blinked back tears. "That night," Traoré continued, "I told my mother, one day I'll fight for people too, like him." The host looked visibly moved. Denzel covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Ibrahim kept speaking. "Years later, when my people needed someone to stand, I remembered your strength, your words, your eyes. I stood, not because I had no fear, but because I had seen what courage looked like in you." The room remained still. Denzel slowly lowered his hand, his eyes now red and glassy. "You're telling me I helped shape a president?" he asked. "No, sir," Ibrahim answered. "You helped shape a man who would never kneel to injustice." A single tear rolled down Denzel's cheek. "Thank you, my brother." The crowd exhaled in awe. But then, Ibrahim said something even more unexpected. Denzel leaned in. The host sat frozen. Ibrahim spoke again. "Today, I speak not only as a president, but as a man who owes a debt. And in Burkina Faso, when someone saves your soul, we never forget." Denzel shook his head gently, humbled. "No, please, I didn't." But Traoré interrupted. "Mr. Washington, I am officially inviting you to be honored in Ouagadougou, but more than that, I wish to name a leadership school after you, a place where our children will learn to stand tall, just as I learned from watching you." The crowd gasped. The host could only whisper, "Wow." Denzel's voice cracked. "Mr. President, I don't deserve that." Ibrahim smiled kindly. "That's exactly why you do." The screen went dark. The call ended. And right there, on live television, in front of millions, Denzel Washington buried his face in his hands and wept. Not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming reality that a single life, lived with purpose, can ripple across oceans and through generations. But this moment was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, Denzel would be packing his bags. Burkina Faso was calling, and what awaited him there would move the world. That night, Denzel couldn't sleep. He kept hearing Ibrahim Traoré's voice. His eyes remained red long after the show ended. By morning, social media had exploded. Denzel Traoré was trending in more than 20 countries. Fans, journalists, and world leaders praised the emotional event, some even calling it the most powerful moment on TV in decades. While the world reacted, Denzel quietly prepared his things, not for a film, not for a red carpet, but for something that felt sacred. He booked the earliest flight to Burkina Faso. No entourage, no headlines, just himself, a small backpack, and a heart full of feelings he couldn't quite name. As the airplane ascended, he stared out the window and whispered, "I don't know what I'm walking into, but I know I have to go." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, President Traoré stood beside a window in the presidential palace, watching the runway far in the distance. His aides asked, "Should we prepare the press?" Traoré shook his head. No cameras, no speeches, just truth. Something meaningful was about to unfold. Neither man could know that within 48 hours, they would both cry again, this time, together. When Denzel's flight touched down, there were no flashing lights, no red carpets, only silence. A black SUV waited on the tarmac. Beside it stood one man, simply dressed, no medals, no formality. It was him, President Ibrahim Traoré. Denzel stepped out slowly. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. They embraced not as a celebrity and a head of state, but as two men whose lives had unexpectedly crossed across continents. "I'm honored you came," Ibrahim said. Denzel smiled faintly. "I didn't come as a star. I came as a brother." The SUV carried them down dusty roads, past neighborhoods and open markets. Children ran barefoot, waving as the vehicle passed, unaware of who was inside. They stopped at a humble home made of weather-worn clay and tin. "This was my home," Traoré said quietly. He opened the door. Inside there were no gods, no extravagance, just old photos, a hand-woven mat, and stillness. Then Traoré handed Denzel a crumpled photograph. In it, a young boy clutched the hand of an older woman. "She raised me," he said softly. "While my parents worked long hours, she fed me, bathed me, told me stories about strength." After a pause, he added, "And she's still alive." They drove another hour along narrow village paths. Words were few. Denzel stared at the photo, a wide smile, gentle eyes, and a strength born only of time. "Where is she now?" he asked. Traoré's jaw tightened. "She still cleans classrooms in a rural school." Denzel turned his head, slow and thoughtful at 80. The president nodded. "She never asked for help. She always said, 'God gave me legs. I'll use them until he takes them.'" When they arrived, the school looked worn but alive. Children played barefoot, drawing shapes in the dirt with sticks. Then she appeared, bent with age, broom in hand but standing tall, the same woman from the photograph. Denzel stepped out of the car. Frozen, Traoré moved toward her. She looked up, her eyes glistened. "Ibrahim," she whispered. He rushed into her embrace. "Mang Hawa," they wept together. Then Denzel approached. She turned and gasped, her hands trembling. You're him," she said, reaching up to touch his face. In that quiet school courtyard in Burkina Faso, time paused. 3 lives, 3 journeys, 1 sacred moment that would touch hearts across the world. But what followed would move an entire nation. Mang Hawa sat between Denzel and President Traoré under the old baobab tree near the school. Her hands were calloused, her back bent slightly, but her voice was still warm. She spoke of young Ibrahim, how he cried in her arms when nights were cold, how he once gave her his only mango so she wouldn't go hungry. Denzel listened, a gentle look in his eyes that few had seen. Then she reached into her worn apron. "I kept this all these years," she said. From her pocket, she pulled a folded yellowed note. Childlike handwriting covered the page. "Read, 'One day, I will be a leader, and I will find you, Mama. I promise.'" Traoré exhaled sharply. He remembered he had written that letter on her birthday at age 9 after she gave him her last piece of bread. Denzel wiped a tear. "She held on to hope," he said. "That's the most powerful kind of faith." Suddenly, a young student ran up barefoot, laughing, holding a cracked plastic ball. "Mama, will you play?" And she did, still barefoot, still smiling. But something inside Denzel shifted. He wasn't just visiting anymore. He had found something sacred. That evening, Denzel and Traoré returned to the palace. The atmosphere had changed. Neither said much. Silence filled the space. Then Traoré stood. "I want to show you something no one outside my family has ever seen." He led Denzel through a quiet corridor, stone walls, soft footsteps, no guards. At the end was a thick wooden door. He unlocked it. Inside was a small, dimly lit room. Old books, faded journals, hand-drawn maps, and 1 large framed photograph. Mang Hawa and young Ibrahim laughing. "This is my real treasure room," Traoré said. Denzel was speechless. Traoré picked up an old notebook. Inside were handwritten entries, his earliest dreams for Burkina Faso. "All of this," he said quietly, "started with her. I am here because she believed I was worth something even when I had nothing." Denzel touched the page, gently. "You lead like a son who remembers love." Traoré nodded. "And I want the world to know that leadership isn't about power, it's about gratitude." The room went still to great men. One shared mission, to honor the woman who shaped a president. And then Denzel had an idea. One that would take everyone by surprise, especially Mama Hawa. At dawn, Denzel sat quietly on the palace terrace, watching the sun rise over Ouagadougou. Mama's face, her laugh, her strength kept echoing in his heart. Then Ibrahim joined him. "I had a thought," Denzel said, sipping his tea. "Let's give her the honor she never asked for." Traoré smiled slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that." That afternoon, without any press, they returned to the village school with a small team. Children gathered, teachers stood in respectful silence. Mama looked confused. "What's happening?" she asked. Then Traoré knelt before her, holding a small velvet box. Inside was a golden medallion, engraved with her name and the national seal. "For your service to this nation as a mother, teacher, and guardian of hope," he said, his voice trembling. The children began to clap. Then Denzel stepped forward, eyes wet. "And from the world of cinema," he said, pulling out an envelope. "I spoke with my producer this morning. Your story will become a film, and every cent will go toward building schools in your name." Mama Hawa dropped to her knees, weeping. She had spent her life giving, and now she was receiving. But the biggest surprise was still to come. 3 days later, Denzel Washington returned to Los Angeles for a live interview on one of America's biggest talk shows. The segment was supposed to be lighthearted, red carpets, upcoming films, laughter. But behind Denzel's smile, something had changed. As the cameras rolled and the host asked about his trip to Africa, Denzel paused. "Can I take a call?" he asked. The host blinked live. Denzel nodded. The crew scrambled. Within seconds, the screen behind him lit up. There he was, President Ibrahim Traoré, live from Burkina Faso. The studio fell into complete silence. Mr. Washington, Traoré said warmly, "Your visit reminded us that kindness knows no borders." Then he added, "You honored my people. Now, I want to honor someone you inspired." He turned and gestured. Mang Hawa appeared on screen, holding a phone, her eyes shining. The audience gasped. Denzel's lips quivered. His hand shook. Traoré continued, "You reminded the world that even those with the loudest voices must sometimes pause to listen." And then Mang Hawa whispered in broken English, "Thank you, my son." Denzel lowered his head and cried on live television. And so did millions watching around the world. Within minutes, the clip had gone viral. It wasn't about film anymore. It was about something deeper. From Paris to Johannesburg, Tokyo to Atlanta, people shared stories about the women who raised them, who shaped them. One photo, Traoré hugging Mang Hawa in her tiny kitchen, became a symbol. International news outlets paused their political coverage to replay that moment. Denzel weeping, Traoré speaking gently, Mang Hawa saying, "Thank you." CNN called it the most human thing ever captured on live TV. Then something unexpected happened. A GoFundMe page quietly created by a student from the village school had aimed to raise $10,000. Within 2 hours, it passed $1 million. People didn't just watch, they felt, and they acted. In a world divided, this story of a soldier's promise, a mother's love, and an actor's tears was uniting strangers. But while the world watched, Mang Hawa was fading, and she had one final wish. By the 6th day of this unforgettable week, her body had grown tired. She had smiled endlessly, embraced dozens, spoken with presidents and stars, but her body was whispering. She knew she asked to speak privately with Denzel and Ibrahim. They came to her small village room. No cameras, no microphones, just 3 souls. "I'm old," she said softly, her voice frail but firm. "I won't see the next planting season." Both men shook their heads. They pleaded with her to rest, to stay strong, but she smiled. "I have no fear. My only wish is that no child in Burkina Faso ever goes to school hungry." A single tear slid down Traoré's cheek. Mang Hawa reached for Denzel's hand. "You tell stories that matter," she whispered, "and the world listens. Tell this story." Then she pulled a small scarf from beneath a pillow, faded, torn, but carefully stitched. It was the same scarf young Ibrahim once tied around her arm when he played president as a child. She placed it gently in his hands. "My first medal," she said softly, and then came her final words. "Take care of each other." They held her close as her eyes closed. Outside, the sun was rising. So was her legacy. President Ibrahim Traoré stood silently beside her bed, still holding the scarf. The room smelled faintly of shea butter and old books. Denzel knelt at her feet, his head bowed, shoulders trembling. Then, in a low voice, Traoré said, "She gave me everything. When I had nothing, now I must give everything back." He turned to Denzel, lifting the scarf like a royal banner. "We will build something in her name, a school, a garden, a future." Denzel looked up, his eyes swollen. Yes, we will. I'll help." Outside, people had already begun to gather. Somehow they knew. Traoré stepped into the crowd and raised the scarf high. "Mama has gone to rest," he said, "but her spirit will feed generations." The crowd wept openly. Within 12 hours, the news had spread across the globe. Burkina Faso declares National Day of Mourning for Mang Hawa that evening. At a press conference, President Traoré made another promise. Every child in Burkina Faso will know her name. And Denzel, he quietly cancelled all his upcoming appearances. "I've played kings and generals," he said, "but today, I serve a mother." The next morning, as the sun rose gently over Burkina Faso, a simple wooden casket rested in the village square. No golden statues, no velvet ropes, just flowers, drums, silence. President Traoré walked behind the casket alone, carrying only one thing, the scarf. Denzel followed, his suit wrinkled from sleep, eyes red with grief. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Messages poured in from world leaders, but the one that touched hearts most came from a young boy in Niger who had walked barefoot for 2 days just to deliver a letter. It read, "Thank you for raising our president." As the casket was lowered into the earth, the village sang. Children cried. Elders clutched their chests. A bird landed softly on the grave and did not move. Then, something unexpected happened. Denzel stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace that had belonged to his father. "She reminds me of him," he said quietly. "Strong, quiet, and never asked for anything." He placed the necklace on the grave. "Goodbye, Mama." Even the cameras stopped filming. Some moments are too sacred for screens. That night, Ibrahim Traoré and Denzel Washington sat beneath the stars on a straw mat in silence. The fire crackled gently between them. They didn't give speeches. They didn't need to. They had just buried the woman who had shaped them both, one with her hands, the other with her spirit. Then Traoré spoke. "Denzel, this week, I remembered who I am." Denzel nodded. "Me too." In that quiet night, they made a pact. not one written in ink but sealed in pain, gratitude, and hope. By morning, plans were already underway for the Mang Hawa Foundation, a joint initiative to provide food, education, and emotional healing for rural children in Burkina Faso and beyond. Denzel committed a full year's salary from his next film, but the most powerful moment wasn't financial. It was a short video Denzel released before flying home. He looked straight into the camera and said, "If one woman in a small village can raise a future president and change the heart of a Hollywood actor, then what are we waiting for?" That video, 100 million views in 24 hours, and the world held its breath for what would come next. 3 days after the funeral, Denzel returned to the US quietly, no press, no fanfare. But the producers of his long-scheduled live interview insisted it still happen. It had already been promoted across multiple networks. Denzel agreed, but under one condition: "Let me speak from my heart." No script. The set was bright, the audience eager. Everyone expected light talk, maybe a joke, or to. Then the host asked, "Denzel, you've traveled the world. What's one moment that changed your soul?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he slowly reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something soft. It was the scarf. He leaned toward the microphone and whispered, "President Ibrahim Traoré called me, and I couldn't breathe. He reminded me that greatness isn't in awards, it's in mothers who wash your wounds, and presidents who remember them." The host, visibly confused, asked, "And what did he say exactly?" Denzel's eyes watered. He picked up his phone, tapped it once, and played a voice recording. The room fell still. It was President Traoré's voice. "Thank you for honoring a woman the world forgot, but who made a man the world remembers." And just like that, Denzel broke down in front of millions. The broadcast spread like wildfire. People paused at dinner tables. Newsrooms went silent. Social media froze. The clip of Denzel, sobbing while clutching the scarf and playing Traoré's voice, became the most shared video of the year. Comments poured in. "I've never cried this hard over a stranger's love. This made me want to call my mom right now, who is Ibrahim Traoré, because the world needs more leaders like him." Across Africa, stories of forgotten mothers surfaced. In America, youth groups organized candlelight vigils in honor of Mang Hawa, but in Burkina Faso, something even more unexpected happened. Children in remote villages began writing letters, not to Santa, not to celebrities, but to President Traoré. One letter read, "If I work hard like you, will I also make my mother proud?" And Denzel, he remained quiet after the interview, until the next morning. He posted a single photo on Instagram, a lone tree in Burkina Faso. The caption read, "She watered roots that now hold up nations." No hashtags, no promotion, just truth. And the world watched and wept. Exactly 1 week after the surprise, Kola statue was quietly unveiled in Ouagadougou. It wasn't a statue of a general, not a king, not even a president. It was a woman, holding a child's hand, wrapped in a familiar scarf. A bronze plate below read, "To Mama Hawa, the mother of all leaders." President Ibrahim Traoré stood before it, Denzel Washington by his side, each holding a candle. Neither spoke, because some endings are too sacred for words. That night, the wind moved gently through the city, and villagers swore they could feel Mama Hawa's spirit brush their cheeks. And in Hollywood, Denzel made one final gesture. He announced a new scholarship, the Hawa Fund, a partnership with the Burkina Faso government, dedicated to supporting rural African girls who dream of becoming leaders. When the press begged for a quote, Denzel simply said, "Some phone calls change your schedule. This one changed my soul." Dear viewer, if this story touched your heart, made you cry, made you think, or reminded you of someone you love, please like, subscribe, and comment below with, "I believe in the power of love and leadership." Your words matter. Let's make stories like this travel across the world. Let's remind people, greatness isn't about fame. It's about heart. Drop your thoughts below. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. And never forget, one kind act can echo across generations. Thank you for watching.